Hey guys, today we're going to talk about VBT based on science, not marketing. We're going to look at scientific validation versus emotion. Purpose of this video, we're going to look at the types of VBT devices. There's the inertial measurement units. Some people just call them accelerometers. We're going to look at the linear positional transducers, the LVTs. We're going to look at the optical units, and we're going to look at the laser unit. So why is science validation important? We're going to find out the accuracy, precision, and the different parameters makes it very important. And then we're going to learn to trust scientific facts versus marketing and sales. So, I'll pause this for a second. The IMUs is a combination of three different sensors: the accelerometer, which shows the change in velocity, a gyroscope, which just kind of gives it an orientation in space, and the magnetometer, which is calibration and directing of data to the right position, just kind of makes everything a little bit smoother. So the big issue right up front, instead of using the first principle velocity equation, it's going to be velocity equals the original velocity plus acceleration times the delta of time. So when the time interval, say for example, if the accelerometer is using like a larger time interval to measure, then you got a bigger error. And so no matter what, there's going to be small amounts of error, even if you have the best of accelerometers. But the bigger the time intervals, the more. That's why accelerometers are okay if, like for example, if you're throwing like a ball or doing something ballistic, because it's a very short time interval in general. However, the longer movements, when you're doing barbell movements, it could be an issue, and then in some it could be more of an issue than others. Sure, because for example, when you're looking at, say that you have a time interval of 10 milliseconds. So the original velocity is 0, of course. And so then you add, the acceleration it measures times that first 10 milliseconds. And so then on the next one, the O becomes the reading from before. It's a backwards way of looking at the direct equation of velocity equals distance divided by time. So that would be the biggest issue. The LPTs, linear position transducer, which is what we use a lot with my athletes and with my research, because when we're talking about the units that are for sale on the market, these are the gold standards. Well, most of them are. So an LPT, you got a tether attached to a spool to measure the first principle velocity equals distance divided by time. So the speed of the rotation of the spool, that's what gathers the data. And so some of those LPTs prevent spool overwind just by the design, which is, this is not me, making a big sales speech for GymAware, but that's what we do at GymAware. And then some don't do that. So if you get, the wind, say, is incorrect, it causes miscalculations. So that's important to know. Once again, that's why you want scientific validation, to make sure that the units you're buying prevents that. So some measure the change in angle for vertical force and vertical power, which is super important for weightlifting, and I would say it's super important for almost all sports, because what you're looking for when you do like a squat, you're looking for the vertical force. Or if you're doing like a power clean, you're for sure wanting to know the vertical force, because that's the force that's important. And all you do is it's a simple look at the X coordinate and the Y coordinate, and you get the perfect vertical vector. Because if you just measure the distance in general, so when you have the horizontal movement, that's really not good movement, and that's not vertical force or power, and those are important. So some just count all the movement. So you want to, once again, look at the validation. Tight brace. Here we are. Come on now. Finish. So you're getting some bar path. One more. We're going to talk about parameters in a minute. And you want consistent and you want valid measurements. All right, optical systems. That's more of the camera systems, but just the one camera system. So the image is created containing a certain amount of pixels. So the better the camera, the better your readings. An algorithm is used to measure the pixels as they move through space, plotting those points, say, on an imaginary graph. So the quality of camera is first concern. Concerns two displacements isn't measured directly. So concern number two, this displacement isn't measured. Like we measure, like if you use the LPT, it's a measure. Basically, consider the tether a ruler. Here, you're just plotting numbers on a graph. So there's going to be slight bits of error. And they're fairly new, so there's not a lot of scientific validation at all. So you definitely want to look into make sure the system you're buying, especially if it's a more expensive system, you want to make sure it's going to tell you the data that you're looking for. And then the laser system, that's just the only one there is Flex. And so Flex is also by GymAware, of course. And it's a laser. That's what it is a laser formed by the end collar that you attach to the barbell. And that laser, as you see in this video of Ryan, the laser bounces off the mat and it acts as an invisible tether. So once again, you're using the first principle of velocity, which is distance divided by time. So why scientific validation? Over here, you see these are some of the measurements that I'm taking. What I'm trying to do here, I'll explain, is I'm looking at ground contact time and height, which is something you can do with, I don't want to say it's out of turn, but I know with the GymAware LPT, you can do the ground contact time, you can look at height. And so it's important that these measurements are correct. I'm also looking at the mean and now decided to start looking at the peak velocity, especially of the Olympic movements. So what I'm trying to do is draw correlations between, the RSI scores that I'm gathering at the beginning from a depth jump, and then I'm looking at also that in relationship to the 85% of the first movement of the day of the athlete. So if their first movement is snatch, which here, or if it's snatch, what we do is when we get to the 85% marker, we just do a pull. It seems easier to get a good solid measurement if they just do a pull versus the entire snatch when I'm looking for readiness. So it's important that these things are reading properly. So data has no room for error, whether it's research or whether it's the athletes that we trust. Parameters, which over here you see, these are the parameters that we use, which is concentric mean power, mean velocity, peak power. And we're going to look at several of these in the ways that I use it in our next article and our next video, so stay tuned for that. But if these parameters don't really work, or if they're, what they say that they're measuring isn't being measured, then we have a problem. So vertical force is important than force in general. We already went over that. Height and dip. That's looking at the measurements above and below the 0 point. Say for a squat, when you walk back with a barbell, when you don't move, you're standing there. That's the 0 point. So the height and dip is how far. The dip is how far below it. The height is how far above it. Bar path, that's very important. But like the thing is if these parameters aren't being measured correctly, then it doesn't really matter what they say that they're doing. So to get some scientific validation is important. So we're looking at accuracy, precision, and repeatability. For me, these are all important. For some, maybe if you don't really care about accuracy, that precision would be important, meaning as long as it's giving you the same measurement each time, that's important. So, but for me, I want to know accuracy, because all the information that's out there regarding velocity-based training has been measured with accurate tools that measure. They're mainly LPT. So Brian Mann, he's the one who's done most of the scientific validation that I'm aware of. And so I want to make sure that I'm using, that the velocity readings I am gathering are going to equate with the ones that he was using. Otherwise, using that information, is probably a bad idea. So some instruments are better at some things than others, and then this affects the parameters. If the accuracy is off, well, that means all these other parameters are going to be off. So spend budget on facts, not on fancy marketing. Just, don't get sold. There's a lot of good salesmen out there, and there's a lot of good advertising, social media. So just take a second to, heck, man, Google it. It's like all the science is out there, which I'm going to give you more of that at the end of this. So also, I would recommend that you look at how long a company has been in business. Instead of like lately, there's been a few fly-by-night companies where they come in and they made a big push. They get some salesmen. They're familiar with the industry. They sell you something and then they're gone, and that leaves you with no updates. That leaves you with no service when you have issues. So it's a big problem. Basically, eventually, it leaves you with useless hardware and software. So make sure that the company's been in there and they're in the long game and they're not just trying to like build a company up and sell it, which has happened a lot lately. So these are my references that I've used in this one. Look these over, look them up, and if you go to the article that I wrote, the links are actually on there, so you can look them up yourself and read those. Don't listen to me, listen to the true science. I hope this video helps you guys, and I hope you use velocity-based training. I hope you use hardware that works and software that gives you all the information you can ever want.